There are so many live plants that you can put in your beginner aquarium. They all can survive. Many can live without CO2, with medium to low light, and they will all do well. But it's very important you buy the right plant for the right purpose. So in this video I'm going to compare 6 plants side by side and try and make sure you make the right choice concerning plants. The first plant on this list is Anubis. And Anubis, there are many different varieties, is a very popular and also a widely available plant. It's very hard to kill and it has very doable requirements. So it doesn't need CO2, it needs low lighting, so it prefers either low light or shaded places in the aquarium. And one of the great things when you're trying to position this plant in your aquarium is that it doesn't like its roots buried in the substrate. It's a rhizome plant, which means that the rhizome should never be buried. And if you're going to bury the roots, chances are you're also burying the rhizome, because the rhizome is the place where both the leaves and the roots emerge in the plant. And because it doesn't like to be buried, that means we can attach it to things. And that gives us so many options and possibilities to create an amazing aquascape in our aquarium. So for example, as you can see right here, it's got a little algae collected over time, but right there is my Anubis plant and I've actually attached it to a rock. This means that while the plant doesn't necessarily grow really tall, you can use it as either background plant by attaching it to something higher, so a rock or a piece of wood. But you can also use it as either mid-ground plants. I wouldn't use the bigger varieties as a foreground plant, but there are very small varieties, for example the Anubis Nana or Nana Petite even. They're very small, you can use them as foreground plants as well. Moving on to the second plant on this list, that's Vallisneria. That's the plant I've got right here. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll give you some beautiful footage. And it's actually a great beginner plant. Not only does it do well without CO2, so without CO2, it's also great because it spreads really quickly, but it's easy to control, so it won't overtake your aquarium. So how should you position Vallisneria in your aquarium? Well, unlike the Anubis plant, which does not like its roots buried, this one is actually a root feeder, which means that it has got a nice root system and it relies on that root system to suck up nutrients for the plant to grow. That means it needs to be rooted, but you also need to provide it with either nutritious soil, so aquarium soil, or you're going to insert root tabs. So where the Anubis plant is a little bit more versatile and you can use it to attach it to plants and other ornaments even, this one serves great as a background plant. It's growing these really tall green halms and it's great as a background plant. Now when it comes to positioning this plant, it's a great idea to take in account the water flow in your aquarium. So what way is the current going? I've got a filter output that's where the water comes back into my aquarium, and if you've got the flow pushing against the top of the Vallisneria leaves, then you get a great effect. Now I want to warn you because there are a couple of different Vallisneria varieties, and there's a jungle Vallisneria that grows very tall. If you've got an aquarium sized similar to mine or maybe a little bit smaller or larger, don't get the jungle Vallisneria, rather get the Vallisneria spiralis. It's very important. Then third on the list is the simplest plant or the easiest plant in the entire aquarium hobby, and those are moss balls, Marimo moss balls. And they aren't even plants, it's more like a spherical algae that's also naturally occurring in flowing rivers. So there are plants, they get all the you get all the benefits that plants give you. So cleaning your aquarium, absorbing ammonia and other toxic substances from the aquarium water. So they actually reduce the amount of water changes that we need to do on our aquarium. And all plants do that, and that's a great reason to introduce live plants to your aquarium. Now, these moss balls are very versatile. They come in different sizes, so you've got the really small ones that I've got right here, and you've also got bigger ones. I've got one of those as well. And these plants are suitable for other types of fish as well. So let's imagine you've got goldfish or maybe bigger cichlids. Then the Anubis plant will be fine. It's a very strong plant. The Vallisneria can be suitable for example, angelfish. It's very suitable. It's actually a recommendation if you're going to keep angelfish. But goldfish, for example, will dig up the roots of the Vallisneria, maybe munch on them, so they're going to get a beating, and I would not recommend Vallisneria when you've got goldfish. However, these moss balls are the solution for fish that don't like plants, because you can just chug them in. That's basically it. They can do very well under minimal lighting. They don't need CO2 whatsoever. And the only care requirement that they really do have is every time you do a water change, push them aside a little bit so they roll over. So the algae on all sides is exposed to light over time. Now for the fourth plant on this list, that's Java Fern. And there are actually multiple types of Java Fern. Right here I've got the regular Java Fern. I've also got a Java Fern Windelov in another aquarium, and there's also a narrow leaf Java Fern. These plants are similar to Anubis plants. Both plants are slow growing plants. They don't need additional carbon dioxide in your aquarium. And they're both rhizome plants. So just like the Anubis plant, the Java Ferns should not be buried with the roots. Instead, you can attach this to your to anything in your aquarium. I recommend using super glue to attach anything in your aquarium. Now, you might think that glue in aquarium is actually a terrible idea, but it works great. Don't go out buying the aquarium suitable dedicated aquarium super glue aquarium. If you know what I mean, just buy your regular cheap super glue. It works wonders. Then for lighting, the Java Fern also loves low to medium light situations. So if you've got bright lights in your aquarium, you've got to make sure that the plants like Anubis and Java Fern are positioned in shaded areas. And the way to do that is by using other plants to create shadow for them. And that brings us to the fifth plant on this list, which are Amazon swords, and that's the bright green tall plant you see over here. Now these plants are actually plants that can do best under moderate to high lighting. But if you've got just medium lighting like I've got, then the plant does fine. It doesn't need additional CO2, but like any other plant, it does benefit from it. So it will grow faster if you provide optimal conditions. Now, how can you use this plant in your aquarium? If you've got anything like angelfish, these plants are almost a must, because angelfish spawn their eggs on the Amazon sword. If you've got a bigger aquarium, then this plant is suitable for you, because unlike the other plants that we've talked about so far, this plant really requires a larger aquarium, especially a taller aquarium. So this is a 25 gallon, and that's already on the small side. You can see that the plant is grown to the top of the aquarium, and there are even leaves that are curved and pushing up against the water level. So preferably this plant would need a little bit larger aquarium. What you can do with this plant, you can use this plant to hide your equipment. So if you've got a heater or a filter intake, or maybe something else, like a wave maker, then these plants are phenomenal at actually hiding them from your sight, so you don't have to look at them all the time. You make sure you give them enough space, and you have to know that this plant grows from the substrate, so it's a heavy root feeder, it needs root tabs definitely, but it's going to grow very tall, but also very wide, so it's going to cast a lot of shade on the rest of the aquarium. If you've got plants like Anubis or Java Fern, or also Kryptocorine, which we're going to get to in a second, then it's great to position them next to the Amazon swords, so they don't get too much bright lights. So the next plant is actually Kryptocorine. And just like other plants, that's a genus of plants, and there are many different varieties for us to pick from. The most popular Kryptocorine in our hobby is the Crypt Vendetti. That's a very popular plant. So what does the plant need? In short, it's a root feeding plant. It grows a heavy root system, so you're going to want to chuck in some of those root tabs that we also use for the Amazon sword and the Vallisneria. And that's it. It needs lower light, but I've also seen it work under medium to high lighting. It's just that under brighter lights, the leaves will stay shorter, and under lower lights, the leaves will grow taller because they're trying to reach for the light. So they're gonna grow very tall. That's also an indicator how bright your light is. So I've been growing this for a couple of years now, and they actually grow pretty tall. And if I would move them to a different aquarium where there's more light, then over time the leaves will stay shorter. And then for the final plant on this list, that's going to be Java moss, or other moss, but Java moss is the most popular and available moss out there. When you buy the Java moss, it's going to be in a small plastic container, and you can use that to attach to, for example, aquarium wood or a rock or another ornament. I'm using terracotta pots for this. And when you've attached it, it needs minimal care actually. If you've got optimal conditions, then you're going to be trimming your Java moss regularly, because it's going to go because it's going to grow very tall quickly. If you've got any algae problems, then Java moss is an algae magnet. So where should you use Java moss? If you're creative and you've got some patience, you can use Java moss as a foreground plant to grow in a carpet-like manner. But more popular is attaching it to pieces of wood or other ornaments, using either super glue, which I've used, but in the past I've also used fishing line, which is also a great way to attach anything aquarium plant related to an ornament in your aquarium. Now, let's imagine you've got a small aquarium. Which plants would be suitable? Which definitely would not be suitable is the Amazon sword. Vallisneria is pushing it in a smaller aquarium, but you can do that. There are smaller varieties of Anubis plants available, especially for smaller aquariums, so make sure you get one of those. If they're not properly labeled, then look for Anubis plants with smaller leaves and shorter stems. Java Fern grows pretty big. It does take a lot of time because they are not very fast growers, but if you're going to use Java Fern in a smaller aquarium, it's going to be as a centerpiece plant, which is going to be really eye-catching when you look at it. Now, what I would recommend in smaller aquariums is the use of Java moss and moss balls. The moss balls are great if you ever have the chance to hold them. They're very soft, they have a velvet-like structure, and they're just lovely. There's even a shrimp on one of my Java or moss balls right now. And a final plant for a small aquarium would be Kryptocorine. Maybe not this variety because it's growing pretty tall, but there are also smaller varieties that stay smaller, And like I said before, if you've got brighter lights, then those plants will stay smaller as well. Now, if you've got a regular community tank, just like mine, then all these plants are great to use, and they also have similar water parameters requirements, so they require similar water parameters, and that's also great because you don't have to make great exceptions. All the fish that fit in a community tank will go very well with all the plants that we use in community tanks. If you're keeping a larger aquarium, maybe with larger fish, then chances are those fish will see very juicy plants like Kryptocorine or Vallisneria with the softer and thinner leaves as lunch, basically. So those plants might not be suitable. If you're keeping goldfish, for example, stay with the strong plants. So Java Fern will do, Anubis will do. Amazon sword is a challenge because the goldfish love to dig deep holes, and they are likely to uproot your Amazon sword. Using moss is also a great way, but yeah, it's harder to keep moss attached to anything when you're keeping fish that are more likely to eat your aquarium plants. Then if you're just making the switch from fake plants to live plants, or from no plants to plants, I would recommend using the plants that are not heavy root feeders, because I've had much more success with plants that don't require root taps, but instead suck their nutrients straight from the water column, and you can easily supplement those by buying a liquid fertilizer and adding that to your aquarium. Liquid fertilizers just have a dosage on the back. If you've got just regular plants or a regularly planted tank, then the dosage will be fine. If you're only keeping 1 or 2 plants, then you can decrease on that dosage. If you've got a heavily planted tank, then do a little bit more. The reason for that is algae is a big problem when you're trying to dose the right amount of nutrients, because plants are only decent at sucking up nutrients, and algae are much more efficient, so they actually are better at sucking up nutrients from the tank. That means that if there's an excess in nutrients, then the plants can't handle it or don't know what to do with it, and the algae starts to grow. So it's always trying to find that balance with the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of light, and the right amount of CO2 as well, even if you're not adding anything. Let me get a little bit more into that. All aquariums contain carbon dioxide, even if you're not adding anything yourself. There's a lot of air underneath the hood, or the lid, I should say. It's not a car. And there's gas exchanges, and carbon dioxide enters the aquarium water. Now, plants need carbon dioxide to grow. It's one of the 3 components they need for photosynthesis. Unlike in the wild, where there's plenty of CO2 in the water where the fish live, the CO2 in our aquariums is depleted rather quickly. So that's why very enthusiastic fish keepers, or plant keepers rather, decide to inject pressurized CO2 in their aquarium. It's expensive, but you can also do it yourself, carbon dioxide. However, if you're just keeping plants that are slow growers, don't require as much to care for, then not adding anything, any CO2 will suffice. Now, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you want to learn more about fish keeping. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, and please leave a comment if you've got any questions at all. I'll be more than willing to answer them for you. And I'll see you guys on the next channel. I've got lots of videos coming up. The next video, not the next channel. Thanks. Cheers.